For more on the really tragic developments in Gaza, the loss of life, and the growing Palestinian-Israeli divide, let's turn to Perry Cammack. He's a fellow of Middle East programs at the Carnegie Endowment for International Peace. Perry, thanks for being on the program. I want to begin with what we saw at the UN Security Council, a number of strong comments from UN diplomats. I just want to read a couple of them. UK's UN ambassador called the violence appalling and shocking. Bolivia's ambassador apologized to millions of Palestinians for the Security Council's failures to protect them and bring them peace. Sweden's ambassador to Security Council said yet again the Israeli security forces use live ammunition, including against children. We condemn the killings. But a very different statement from United States UN Ambassador Nikki Haley. What did you think about what she had to say?
Well, I think there's two ways to look at it, Asieh. Thanks for having me. On one hand, of course, the U.S. is traditionally the strongest supporter of Israel at the United Nations. On the other hand, having this come on the heels of the move of the ambassador this week, the withdrawal of the Iran nuclear deal just last week, it's hard to avoid the conclusion that the U.S. is increasingly isolated, including from some of its closest traditional transatlantic allies, as you mentioned, in the UK and Sweden and other European countries.
She also said Israel acted with restraint. How is that being played around the world?
Well, look, certainly any country does, of course, have the right to protect its border. But I think implicit in that is the idea that the use of force will be proportionate. I also have no doubt that Hamas was trying to take political advantage of the violence and even the deaths. At the same time, something like 1,500 Palestinians were shot with live ammunition. By all accounts, most of those were unarmed, or at least armed with nothing more than rocks, as your correspondent said. So I think it's hard to argue that Israel's force in this case was anything other than outrageous, frankly.
Perry, when you talk to Palestinians, they say there is a double standard with U.S. position. There's a double standard in how the Western media covers these types of stories. When it comes to Palestinian lives and the lives lost, do you think this story would have been handled differently if more than 60 Israelis had been killed in the hands of Palestinians?
I suspect that's the case. I mean, we could also imagine if protesters or rioters were killed by security forces in Tehran, for example, how the media would have portrayed it. I suspect that's true, but you know, it's hard to speculate.
And where do we go from here? Palestinians no longer seem to consider the U.S. an honest broker, a reliable peace broker, and then the Palestinian people continue really living under this 10-year blockade, dismal humanitarian conditions, and just basically no hope.
Yeah, well, of course, the Trump administration has still been talking, I mean, as recently as yesterday, about this idea of launching a peace initiative. I would hope that the violence of the last 2 days and yesterday in particular would disabuse the administration of that idea. I mean, I think what urgently needs to happen is some kind of new arrangement for Gaza. As you mentioned, the territory has been under blockade, essentially economic and human blockade for years. Clearly, something has to give in terms of new arrangements that find a way to open up Gaza, both for human travel and the ability of Gazans to get out, but also economic activity to give them some hope for a better future.
Hope, certainly something that is very much lacking in Gaza these days. Perry Cammack, thank you so much.